Hello. I'm James, and I live in Manchester in the UK. And you're listening to English with a Brew, a podcast where I talk about different day-to-day topics to help you learn English the most natural way possible. And that is only by listening to it. If you want to support this podcast, read transcripts, and get exclusive access to more content, go to patreon.com/English with a Brew. So, as we say in Manchester, get a brew on and let's get started. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the city in which I live, or the place I call home, Manchester. Manchester is a large city in the northwest of the UK. The city and the surrounding area, which is called Greater Manchester, has a population of approximately 2.8 million people. That means it's the third biggest city in the UK, behind London and Birmingham. Like all cities in the UK and probably in the rest of the world, there are lots of restaurants, bars, cinemas, shopping centres, and other things you can do with your free time. It's a big city full of good food, friendly people, and generally lots of work opportunities. But today, I want to talk about some of the things that make my city unique and impressive, not just a good place to live. Usually when someone realizes that I live in Manchester, or when I tell them that I live in Manchester, the main thing that they know about, or the first thing that comes to mind, is football. Here we have two of the largest football teams in the UK and in the world, Manchester United and Manchester City. And so because of this, there are two gigantic, enormous football stadiums in the city called Old Trafford and the Etihad Stadium. And there is a strong rivalry between the two teams. Manchester United, historically, have been better. They've won more trophies and titles than Manchester City. But in recent years, Manchester City are the better of the two teams. So when they play against each other, the atmosphere in the city is incredible. It's amazing. The centre is busy and full of people supporting their favourite teams. And in the centre of the city, you can find the National Football Museum, where you can learn about the history of football and its players, as well as see football shirts, balls, and other historical artefacts from the most famous football games. But before the football, Manchester was in fact one of the most important parts of the Industrial Revolution here in the UK. And the Industrial Revolution happened here in the 18th and 19th centuries, approximately between the years 1760 and 1840. The first canal was built between Manchester and a town called Worsley, which transported large amounts of coal on boats to power the growing city and its factories. And soon after, the canal was extended to the city of Liverpool, which meant that the city could import and export materials and products in large amounts or large quantities. Manchester developed a reputation for importing cotton and producing high-quality cotton cloth to make clothes and other things. At one point, Manchester had 99 mills to produce cloth and export it all over the world. Now, the architecture of the city is a mixture of old industrial buildings and more modern architecture, and the history of the Industrial Revolution can be seen everywhere in the city. There are a load of things that Manchester is known for, more than just those two. But the third and final thing I'm going to talk about today is feminism. In the year 1858, Emmeline Pankhurst was born in Manchester, and she was one of the most important women and political activists in the history of the whole country, because she created or founded the suffragette movement at the start of the 20th century in the year 1903. The suffragettes did lots of things, too many incredible things to talk about in just one part of one episode. But ultimately, their protests and demonstrations won women in the UK the right to vote in elections for the first time. And now, today, you can see a statue dedicated to Emmeline Pankhurst in the city centre. And you can visit one of the houses where the Pankhurst family lived. Now it's a museum open to everyone to learn about Emmeline, her family, and the history of the suffragettes. So as we reach the end of this episode, my question for you today is, what did you already know about Manchester? Maybe you've already visited the city and you can tell me about your experience here. Or maybe you're planning to visit in the future and this episode has given you some information about this wonderful city. Or maybe you weren't already planning to visit this city, but now, after listening to this episode, you are. Either way, let me know. That's everything for today's episode of English with a Brew. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments if you did or if you didn't, and tell me what topics you'd like to hear me talk about in future episodes. And don't forget, if you want to support this podcast and get access to all of the exclusive episodes, you can do that on my Patreon page. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day, morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever time it is where you are right now. Take care.